I ask unanimous consent the next 40 minutes be under the control of the Democratic senators, that the time be equally divided among the following senators: Reid of Nevada, Boxer, Whitehouse, Markey, Schatz, and Schumer.
Is there objection? Without objection. So ordered.
Mr. President, virtually every caucus that we have, every Tuesday caucus that we have, I have senators report on what's going on in the world as it relates to climate change. And I wish these were fun-filled presentations where people laughed and clapped and smiled, but they're not. They're very downbeat, because each senator that makes a presentation, whether it's a senior senator from New Hampshire who talks about moose dying in her state because the fleas and ticks no longer die in the cold weather. She explained how about a third of the moose are dead in New Hampshire. Whether it's the senator from the state of Michigan, junior senator from the state of Michigan, talking about what is going on in that beautiful state of Michigan. Without going through the list of senators who's reported on what's going on as they see it with the climate change, everyone within the sound of my voice should rest assured that things are not good. Our world is changing and has already changed drastically. The Earth is undergoing a shift, a man-made climate change shift. We don't need to travel to the polar ice caps for proof, although if we did, we would see that too. There's evidence all around. Talking about polar ice cap, think about Alaska. Millions of acres are on fire as we speak. Not a fire as we see in the forests or the rangelands of Nevada, where you see fire flames flip up into the sky so high it's hard to believe sometimes. But this is burning underground into the permafrost. It's awful what's happening in Alaska. But let's talk about Nevada. Nevada's an unusual state, many different ways. We have over 32 mountains, more than 11,000 feet high. We have one mountain that we share with California that's 14,000 feet high. We have beautiful, beautiful wilderness. I've had the good fortune during my time in the Senate to legislate where when I came here, we had about 60,000 acres of wilderness. We are now approaching about 4 million acres of wilderness. And it's beautiful, beautiful country. These beautiful mountains, antelope, mountain sheep, of course. We even have mountain goats. It's a beautiful, beautiful state. We share with California Lake Tahoe. Beautiful, beautiful Lake Tahoe that Mark Twain said is the fairest place on all the earth. The water level this summer is at record low. Water that we used to take for granted that would come out of the lake isn't coming out anymore. Snowpack in the Sierra Nevada mountains is a fraction of normal levels. We used to, just a few decades ago, had piles of snow that was unbelievable. Tens and tens of feet of snow every winter. No longer. In fact, this past March, World Cup ski cross and snowboard cross races had to be canceled. Why? Had no snow. No snow at a place where we had the Winter Olympics in Squaw Valley. No snow. Canceled the races. As I've said here on the floor, because it's so dramatic as far as I'm concerned, our black bears, many of them aren't even hibernating. It's not cold enough. And just this past June, a few weeks ago, Lake Mead, at one time was the largest man-made lake in America. It isn't anymore because of Lake Powell, which overtook Nevada for the largest man-made lake in America. Lake Powell is on the road to being eliminated as part of the Great Colorado River program that allows the states of California, all the upper Colorado states, Arizona, Nevada, to survive. This past June, Lake Mead water levels sunk to record lows, record lows. Towns that were buried with the making of Boulder Hoover Dam, we're now, we can see them again. St. Thomas is an example. An early Mormon settlement there was buried in water, no longer. Now they're doing archaeological work that was buried under Lake Mead previously. Now that's only Nevada. And that's only a touch of what's happening in Nevada. Wildfires are devastating our state, wiping out native grasses and plants, causing endangered species to need to be listed or as threatened or going extinct. Because, for example, if you have birds that survive in our sagebrush and sagebrush is burnt, no longer exists, and you get these foreign species that come in, namely cheatgrass, that's no good for anything other than more fires. That's what we have in Nevada. Devastating wildfires. But around the United States, massive floods are destroying life around the globe. The poles are melting. By the year 2050, scientists estimate that the sea levels will rise in the world 16 feet. What will that do to Florida? Of all the major cities in the world, with virtually no exception, they're all in coastal areas. What coastal city in the world is going to be hit hardest by this climate change, the rising of the seas? Miami, Florida, the state of Florida. Massive floods are destroying life around the globe. The poles are melting, I repeat. Ocean resources are being exhausted. But stunningly, Republicans in Congress are ignoring changes to our environment that we're all witnessing. They're here. They're in denial. They're in what I refer to as Koch denial. Because remember, everybody, the two Koch brothers don't want us to do anything with climate change. Why? Number one, it may prevent them from making more billions. They're heavily invested in tar sands in Canada, and of course, their original fortunes were made in oil and gas here in America, and coal. Republicans are in denial, but they're in Koch denial. Last month, House Republicans passed legislation that would rescind President Obama's action addressing air pollution and climate change. Now, that legislation is not going to happen over here, but that's the mindset of the Republicans. Not to be outdone, Republicans here in the Senate are trying the same thing with the Senate Interior and Environmental Appropriation bills, filling it with policy riders that are dangerous to the planet, dangerous to America. Republicans all know that the planet's changing. I hope they do. But they don't. If a Republican knows this, it's a rare Republican. I'm still waiting for him to step forward. Republicans don't admit it's a problem. Where's their solution? Well, they have none. They have no solution because they refuse to acknowledge there's a problem. So let's not fool ourselves. It's why Republicans reject climate change. I've already said why. It's the Koch challenge they all have. Every presidential candidate has to be very careful that there are certain things, and I don't know them all because I'm not in attendance at their meetings, but number one, XM Bank, it has got to stay dead. 165,000 people working in America, get rid of them. It's a government program, get rid of it. Even though some 40 other countries have working XM Bank programs as we speak right now, taking business away from American exporters. My Republican friends are unwilling to stand up to the oil barons that bring their filthy tar sands from Canada. Republicans offered no legislation or offered a single idea that would protect our world from climate change. The closest they came was to try to be funny here on the floor when it snowed, and they brought a snowball into the Senate chamber saying, couldn't be climate change, we got some snow today. Well, we did get some snow, but that doesn't mean we don't have climate change. It is shameful to turn our back on the biggest dilemma the Earth faces. We must come together to address climate change. I'm very happy today that my friend, this junior senator from Rhode Island, is here, because he is focused on all kinds of issues relating to climate change. But he has been the driving force of recognizing that one of the places that climate change is devastating our world is in our oceans. Our oceans are we can't see that very well because the oceans are so massive, but our oceans in places are already dead, not dying, but dead. So it's shameful, I repeat, to turn our back on the biggest dilemma the Earth faces, probably in the history of our world. We must come together to address climate change. There are solutions that involve, among other things, clean energy. Just a few weeks ago, a solar company announced they would build a 100-megawatt solar farm, sell the power to Nevada's utility, NV Energy. The electricity generated by that solar farm was described by the press as, quote, not only the cheapest solar, it may be the least expensive electricity in the entire country. That's what solar does now. Think about that. The cheapest power being built in America today is solar, and it's inexhaustible. It doesn't have to be in the desert where the sun shines all the time. It can be used where the sun doesn't shine all the time and used well. The solutions to address climate change are here. They're right here. In Nevada, we're fortunate. $5 billion of development we've had with solar and geothermal and a little bit of wind. The solutions to address climate change are here. They're affordable, become more so every day. They've created thousands of jobs, and I misspoke. It's $6 billion now in Nevada, not $5 billion, has been invested in clean energy. Republicans should stop denying climate change. If they want to keep complaining about the solutions, they should offer their own solutions. But there can't be a solution if they don't see a problem. So I'm not going to hold my breath. The Republicans are going to change their ways. But Mr. President, this is the number one issue facing our world. The Defense Department, they are concerned about the resources they're going to get for manpower. But you ask one of the people who run this government's military, chiefs of staff, they're concerned because of the security of this nation. We cannot ignore this issue any longer. It's affecting the security of this nation for lots of other reasons, namely what it does to other countries that put pressure on us. So I appreciate very much my colleagues joining in this little discussion we're going to have here today, because of the discussion we have to have, because the world is in trouble because of a climate change.
The senator from Rhode Island.
Mr. President, let me take a moment to commend the leadership of our minority leader on this issue. He has really made it a priority in the caucus. He has seen its effects at home in Nevada, and he is a really outstanding voice in this area, and I'm very grateful to him. I also want to thank and recognize my chairman on the Environment and Public Works Committee, Barbara Boxer, than whom no one is more forceful on the need we have to address climate change and the carbon pollution that we are emitting that is causing this. Mr. President, we are here just after the 6-month anniversary of an interesting statement that was made by the Republican chairman of the Energy Committee, the senator from Alaska. 6 months ago, January 22nd to be exact, she said, "What I'm hoping that we can do now is get beyond the discussion as to whether climate change is real and talk about what do we do." January 22nd on the Senate floor, 6 months ago. What have we seen from the majority party in the 6 months since their energy chairman said, we need to get to this question, we need to concede that climate change is real, and we need to address what do we do? We've seen exactly nothing. That is to say, nothing but complaints. Oh, the president's clean power plan is no good. Oh, we should have massive resistance to the president's clean power plan. Oh, we should defund the EPA. These are the thoughts that the Republican majority brings as we face this question. So it's worth looking at some of the folks who are very clear that climate change is a real problem. Here's one, NASA. Our scientists from NASA couldn't be clearer about the importance of climate change and about the role of carbon pollution. How smart are NASA scientists? They're driving a rover around on the surface of Mars, folks. They just shot a spacecraft by Pluto close enough to take pictures of it and send back data. And what does the Republican majority have to say about NASA's position on climate change? That they're in on a hoax. They basically accuse NASA scientists of being dishonest, even though they're the ones who put our country on the surface of Mars and who put an American vehicle close enough to Pluto to take pictures of it. Look at Walmart. Just a moment ago, the junior senator from Arkansas was presiding. Walmart joined with a dozen other companies yesterday at the White House to say climate change is real. These aren't left-wing companies. This was Walmart. This was Alcoa. This was GM. This was Coke and Pepsi. This was UPS. We have got to start taking this seriously. But is there anything out of the state of Arkansas, Walmart's home state, on climate? Nope. Not a single thing. Forbes magazine just did an article, Climate Change Will Cause Increased Flooding in Coastal Cities. The picture is a satellite picture of the state of Florida. The little caption under the picture says, flooding from climate change is threatening much of the coastline of Florida, including major cities. And yet we've got two presidential candidates from Florida on the Republican side. What do they have to say about climate change? Nothing. Nothing other than, I don't know, I'm not a scientist, all the usual dodges. Pope Francis has written an encyclical, an extraordinarily important article in the Catholic faith about the reality and the effect of climate change. What do our Catholic Republican senators have to say about that? Nothing. We're not going to listen to him. He's not a scientist. Well, actually, technically he is. He's a trained chemist. But that's the line, not a scientist. What could possibly explain these strange anomalies? The biggest corporation in Arkansas knows that climate change is a problem, and nothing from the senators from Arkansas. The coastline of Florida is under immediate threat, according to Forbes magazine, the capitalist tool. And the presidential candidates from Florida can't say a single thing about it. The Pope is calling on us.
The senator's time has expired.
May I ask unanimous consent for a closing minute?
Without objection.
The last thing I'll mention is that there is a common thread that links all of this, and it is money. The Koch brothers are putting hundreds of millions of dollars into this election. One of their organizations, said it was going to spend $889 million in this election, and that anybody who crossed them on climate change would be at, and I quote, a severe disadvantage. Nice little campaign you got here, and I hate to put it at a severe disadvantage with my $900 million. So what we have is secret money and threats related to it that are just obliterating what had been a good Republican response on climate change, on other environmental issues. We need to move on, and I will yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Oh, the senator from Hawaii.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to talk a little bit about the particulars of the Clean Power Plan and address some of the questions that have been raised by some of the opponents. And I think the first premise has to be that carbon is an airborne pollutant, that the Clean Air Act doesn't just give the EPA the authority to regulate airborne pollutants, but it actually requires that all airborne pollutants that can cause a public health risk get regulated. And that's the basis of the Supreme Court decision here. This doesn't give the EPA the discretion. This doesn't give the Obama administration the discretion to regulate carbon pollution. It requires that they do. And so the only question is not a legal one. The legal one has been settled. The EPA is required to regulate under the Clean Air Act pollution. The only question then remaining is carbon a pollutant? And I don't think there's anybody credible in this space that thinks that carbon is not a pollutant. Look, I think we are actually making progress over the last 6 to 12 months. We have seen a sea change among Republican members of Congress who are, I think, increasingly concerned about being on the wrong side of history, about being on the wrong side of science, about being on the wrong side of a whole generation of young voters, Republican, Democrat, and Independent, who understand that this is one of the great challenges of our generation. And so we're seeing some movement. We're seeing some openness to at least concede that this problem, in fact, exists. This problem, in fact, exists. And we have this incredible law in the Clean Air Act. We don't need to pass a new law. Of course, Senator Whitehouse and I have been working very hard with Senators Boxer and others on a carbon fee, but we also have the tools at our disposal to regulate carbon pollution because like methane, like other airborne pollutants, it is causing environmental and health damage. And so the Clean Power Plan is very simple. It is treating this as though it is the pollutant that it is. And originally, there were some, I think, legitimate concerns about how this thing was going to get administered. And so let me give you a for example. If you are in a very, very small rural state and you are going to regulate not a state's total carbon emissions, but an individual power plant's carbon emissions, that's a really tough sell. Because there are instances where, because of legacy infrastructure, because of distance, for instance, in Hawaii, you have remote and relatively small islands. And so it's very difficult to ask the island of Lanai, which is running on a diesel-fired fire generator, or the island of Molokai, to, at an individual power plant level, reduce carbon emissions. That's just tough. They can make improvements in efficiency, but they may not be able to meet the standard. And so the idea here is that you allow all of it to aggregate. And so what Hawaii did was, we have the Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative, recognizing that there are going to be some places that are going to have incredible challenges economically and in terms of the financing of the projects, incredible challenges complying at the micro level, at the site level, at the power generation level. But if we provide flexibility to states, and I know in California with the cap and trade program, in the Northeast with the RGGI program, there is a flexibility regionally or within states or energy systems to say, as long as you in the aggregate are making sufficient progress, we're going to allow you to figure out how to make that progress on your own. And so these rules we anticipate will provide sufficient flexibility to allow economies to thrive. And I'd like to just make one final point on this before hearing from the great senator from California, and that is that all of the hue and cry, all of the panic, all of the heartburn about what is going to happen to our economy doesn't have to be an abstract question anymore. We have states that are currently exceeding the anticipated thresholds in the Clean Power Plan. So we don't have to imagine what is going to happen to various economies if we comply, because we've got states such as California, we've got the Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative. You know, 2 years ago, I was on the floor talking about the Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative with a 40% renewable portfolio standard. And the legislature in the last 3 or 4 months just passed the first 100% clean energy statute in the United States. And our unemployment rate is 4%, and we have exceeded our previous goals. And California, with its cap and trade program and all the hue and cry and panic that was caused about what would happen to our economy, California is booming. Hawaii is doing well. People still have their economic challenges, but it's not because of our desire to drive an innovation economy and to try to solve this great challenge of our time. We can create clean energy jobs. We can innovate into the future. America has an incredible opportunity to lead in this space, and I'm so pleased to be part of that innovation and part of that leadership. We're putting our marker down as a country. We understand that this is going to take a global effort, but now America has the credibility to lead on climate. And with that, I yield the floor to the great senator from California.
Mr. President,
The senator from California.
before the senator from Hawaii leaves the floor, I just want to say what a breath of fresh air he is. And, you know, that's something we say to compliment somebody, but in this case, he is fighting for clean air. He's fighting for his kids and his grandkids. And it's just been an honor to work with you, sir. I want to say that the world understands this. Americans understand this, that we are facing a serious threat to our nation. Dangerous climate change. And we absolutely need to act now. And the evidence is all around us. And I would ask unanimous consent to put my full statement in the record, Mr. President.
Without objection, so ordered.
But I want to highlight in the brief time I have just some of the facts. These cannot be refuted, sir. The evidence of climate change is around us. NASA and NOAA found that 2014 was the hottest year around the globe since record keeping began 134 years ago. Now, how my colleagues could come to the floor and dispute this, if you ask people, do you respect NASA? I would say everyone from our kids to our grandmas say absolutely. They're scientists. The American Meteorological Association, the society, reported that numerous key climate change indicators were at or near record levels. They found 2014 was the hottest year since record keeping began in 1880. 2014 was the hottest year since 1880. And sea surface temperatures and sea levels were at record highs. Now, here's the problem. When you have these kinds of record temperatures, they come with a cost to the wildlife, a cost to human life. And I don't have time today to go into what we're beginning to see, but about 8 years ago, when I did take the gavel of the Environment and Public Works Committee, we held a hearing. Everything that was predicted by the scientists is coming true. Everything. Now, here is the good news. Here is the great news. My state of California is a true leader in this area. With the leadership of our state legislature, our governor, Jerry Brown, and leading activists in our state such as Tom Steyer and many others, we are seeing California stand up and address this issue. And what has happened? What has happened? All the gloom and doom. Oh my God, if you try to move away from dirty energy, it's going to be terrible for everybody. Let me tell you the good news. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, in 2011, California had over 360,000 green jobs, the most of any state. And in 2014, there were currently more than 2,094 solar companies at work throughout the value chain in California, employing 54,700 people. And let me tell you, there are some days in California, Mr. President, where we get half of our energy from the sun. Half of our energy from the sun. And here's the other thing you have to know. California households pay the 9th lowest electricity bills in the country. So all the doom and gloom, you're going to have to pay more and all the rest, is so much talk. You know, a long time ago, when I became aware of climate change, I looked at it and thought, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? But the longer I looked at it and the longer I studied it, the faster I recognized that if we address climate change in the right way, it will be a boon to our economy, it will be a boon to our health, because we know for sure that asthma and respiratory ailments and cardiovascular disease They're all threats to our families, and they will go down. The risks will go down because when you clean up the carbon pollution, you clean up all the other pollutants that go along with it. Well, just this week, one of our great leaders whom I mentioned, who is the leader of NextGen, the president and founder, Tom Steyer, said the following: "Our country needs bold leaders who will lay out a plan to achieve more than 50% clean energy by 2030, putting us on the path to a completely clean energy economy by 2050 and millions of new jobs." And I would ask unanimous consent to place in the record the fact sheet from NextGen Climate.
Without objection.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. And I will tell you their key findings, and then I will complete my presentation. How many more minutes do I have?
The senator has consumed 5.5 minutes.
Okay, I would ask for 1 more minute.
Without objection.
So here's what NextGen found. Achieving more than 50% energy by 2030 will spur economic growth and create jobs. I agree. Second, most Americans support a goal of more than 50% clean energy by 2050. I think the polls bear that out. Third, climate change puts America's economy and security at risk. I absolutely agree with that, Mr. President. We've been told that by the defense establishment. Next, transitioning to a clean energy economy will prevent climate disaster. That is true. And lastly, they say 50% clean energy by 2030 is feasible. And although I haven't studied this myself, I can say that the Energy Information Administration estimates that this can happen if we take the kind of steps President Obama is recommending, and a lot of us here in the United States Senate support, putting a price on carbon that will save us from devastating climate change. It will provide jobs and will make us a healthier nation. And with that, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The senator from Massachusetts.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, we're at a crossroads. We've got a catastrophe that is looming for our planet. We have the world looking at the United States, wondering if we're going to lead. We have the Pope coming to the United States and speaking out on this issue. We have the world gathering in Paris this November, this December, discussing this issue, because it is now the focal point of the world, and that is the danger of ever-escalating, dangerous climate change, the warming of our planet, and the catastrophic consequences of the warming of our planet. The tides are rising, snows are melting. In other places, the snows are greater than they've ever been before. Climate change, dangerous climate change. That is what is happening. What is the response from the Republican side of the aisle? We hear nothing. We hear denial. We hear essentially an argument that it's not our responsibility to deal with it. But the Pope is asking us to be the leader. The world is asking us to be the leader. The young people in our country, the green generation, are asking us to be the leader. The United States is a technological giant. We have the capacity to invent the technologies that are going to radically reduce greenhouse gases, not only in our own country, but around the world. New renewable energy technologies, new battery technologies, new ways of generating electricity in the 21st century. We do not have to be tied to 19th century technologies, oil and coal. It's the 21st century. Now, in our country in 2015 and 2016, we are going to generate 40,000 new megawatts of wind and solar. Now you say, well, what does that translate into? What is 40,000 megawatts? Well, if you think of all the nuclear power plants that have been constructed in our country over the last 70 years, we now have 100,000 megawatts of electricity coming from nuclear power. In these 2 years, 2015 and 2016, we're going to add 40,000 in wind and solar. The experts did not think this was possible 10 years ago. The experts would have said, oh, wind and solar, that's nice, but it can't replace the coal that we've always been relied upon to provide our electricity going back to the 19th century. Impossible, they say. No. This new generation is rising up. And what is doing it? Well, we've put tax breaks on the books now for wind and solar. We're giving them the same breaks that we always gave oil. We always gave coal. But what do we hear from the Republican Party? Should we eliminate the coal and oil tax breaks? Oh, no, you can't touch those. But when we say, well, let's renew the tax breaks for wind and solar, they say, yeah, it's time for us to now allow these new industries to go it alone. And that's been the problem all along. There isn't a level playing field. What we've done over the last 7 years is create a level playing field so the new energy technologies can compete against these old tax breaks for coal and oil that have been on the books for generations. We can do it. We can solve this problem. But you can't create an unlevel playing field. The same thing is true with automotive technologies. All of that CO2 coming out of automobiles, coming out of trucks. People said you just have to live with it. The average for the vehicles that ordinary families drive in our country just 6 years ago was 25 miles a gallon. Essentially the same as 1975. The green generation, the young people in our country say, let's do better. Let's invent new technologies. Let's have electric cars. Let's have plug-in hybrids. Let's have just a generation of hybrids itself. No, says the industry. Too difficult. We can't figure it out. It'll cripple our industry. We passed new laws out here on the Senate floor, on the House floor. What has happened? We have a revolution in automotive technology. We have people now driving around in computers on wheels. The dashboard looks like it's a spaceship. The cars are infinitely more efficient, and we're heading towards 54.5 miles per gallon. What did the experts say 10 years ago? Impossible. We cannot do it. These are the same people who said to President Kennedy, we cannot put a man on the moon in 8 years. President Kennedy said, we do not go to the moon because it is easy. We go because it is hard. We are the United States of America. We will invent the new propulsion systems. We will invent the new metals. We will invent all of the things we need so that America dominates the Soviet Union and not the opposite. Well, the whole world is looking at this generation, this Senate. We have a plan. President Obama has a plan to control emissions coming out of the power plants of our country. Our plan is one that moves towards renewable energy and away from these smokestacks of CO2 going up into the atmosphere, creating a blanket that holds in the heat and continues to warm the planet dangerously. That's what greenhouse effect is. Just holds in the heat, all of this pollution. When we move towards solar, when we move towards wind, when we move towards geothermal, when we move towards all of the new technologies, the CO2 is cut radically. and the planet is able to breathe, and breathe in a way that says to generations to come that we will have left this planet better than it was before. That's what the Pope is going to come and talk to us about, dangerous climate change. That is what the Pope is going to come and ask the United States to be the leader and not the laggard, to not allow the deniers of climate change to dominate our debate in the United States of America, to not allow the technologies of the 19th century to dictate to the 21st century. Just 18 years ago, a small percentage of all Americans had a wireless device in their pocket. You want to know why? The experts said it was impossible. You can't do it. Today, everyone is walking around with one of these in their pockets, including 700 million people in Africa. We can do it. In Kenya, in Ethiopia, they're moving towards geothermal and solar and wind. They're skipping the landline delivery of telecommunications service in favor of wireless, and they're also skipping the landline system of generation of electricity and moving to renewables, not relying on coal, moving on to the new. Now, you can't eliminate it totally. You need some coal, you need some oil, but we can continue to reduce it year after year after year. What is the plan that we hear from the Republican Party? How do we reduce? How do we reduce the amount of greenhouse gases that we are going to be sending up into the atmosphere? What's their plan? They say President Obama's plan, they don't like it. Where's their plan? What are they going to do? What are they going to tell the green generation? All these pages on the floor representing tens of millions across our country. They're asking the question, where's the plan? How do we do this? How do we solve the problem? How do we invent the new technologies, as we did with wireless technology, and spread it across the planet? How do we do it for climate change as well? So that's going to be the essential debate. Schatz says, I'm not happy. I'm sad. Where's the Republican emoji? Where's the one that says, we can do it? We're America. We're not going to allow the rest of the world to have a problem that the United States is going to exempt itself because it's the only country that's denying climate change. The United States Senate has a great responsibility. We have an opportunity to be the global leader. We can save all of creation while engaging in massive job creation here in America. We now have 100,000 clean energy jobs in Massachusetts. It's a big job creator. It's an employer of Americans all across our country. We have a chance to do something special. We can begin this transition in a much more serious way, away from coal, away from oil, and towards this renewable solar era of the 21st century. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. President, I yield back the balance of my time.